When most people picture the downfall of Rome, images of barbarian hordes storming the gates, broken legions fleeing the battlefield, or scheming emperors meeting their end through poison in lavish palaces come to mind. Yet empires rarely crumble purely from outside pressure. Internal rot often plays an equally devastating role. Among the most destructive internal forces is the degradation of money itself. Rome did not collapse only because of foreign invasions or political corruption. Its monetary system disintegrated. The warnings embedded in Rome's currency failure continue to hold urgent relevance for every contemporary economy that assumes money can be endlessly manipulated without paying a steep price. The silver denarius and the Roman economy. This section presents the silver denarius, which served as the cornerstone of Roman commerce for hundreds of years. First struck around 211 BC, the coin consisted of almost pure silver and enjoyed widespread confidence both inside the empire's borders and far beyond them. Roman legions received their wages in denarii, traders insisted on being paid in them, and everyday citizens hoarded their savings in this reliable form of money. Far more than a simple medium of exchange, the denarius symbolized faith in the enduring might of Rome itself. Its worth was directly tied to the perceived stability and authority of the empire. As long as people retained their trust in Rome's supremacy, they continued to place their faith in the denarius. The expenses of maintaining the empire and the onset of debasement. Running the vast Roman Empire came with enormous financial burdens, including the salaries for vast legions, the construction and upkeep of extensive road networks and aqueduct systems, and the constant expense of military campaigns. By the 2nd century AD, the empire found itself increasingly hard-pressed to protect its frontiers from incursions by Germanic tribes, conflicts with the Parthians, and waves of domestic disorder. Tax collections were scarcely sufficient to meet even the most basic obligations, forcing successive emperors to turn to a familiar yet deeply resented solution: debasement of the currency. Rather than risk widespread anger by raising taxes further, they progressively lowered the silver content in the denarius, a method that had been used sporadically before but became far more frequent and severe. The hard numbers from this period starkly illustrate the mounting economic strain Rome was facing. The erosion of silver purity and the surge of inflation. Under Emperor Augustus, the denarius was composed of roughly 95% pure silver. By the beginning of the 3rd century, during Caracalla's rule, that purity had plummeted to approximately 50%. The decline accelerated further under Gallienus, when the silver content sank to below 5%. What had once been a genuine silver piece had been reduced to little more than a bronze core thinly plated with silver. This gradual but unmistakable dilution was impossible for the population to ignore. With the coin's intrinsic value steadily vanishing, rampant inflation took hold. Everyday prices skyrocketed, inflicting profound economic suffering on average citizens. To offset the escalating cost of living, soldiers pressed for substantial pay increases. Merchants, losing confidence in the debased currency, increasingly rejected denarii in favor of bartering goods directly or insisting on payment in gold. As public faith in the money supply collapsed, regional economies shifted back toward primitive exchange systems. In response, emperors simply accelerated the cycle by issuing even lower quality coins with virtually no precious metal content. The 3rd century crisis and widespread economic turmoil. This section examines the profound economic disintegration that gripped the Roman Empire during the so-called crisis of the 3rd century, spanning roughly from 235 to 284 AD. The empire plunged into profound disorder, marked by relentless barbarian invasions, devastating pandemics, repeated civil conflicts, and an astonishingly rapid succession of emperors, often lasting only months or even weeks. These surface-level upheavals masked a deeper structural collapse, the complete breakdown of the monetary and fiscal system. As the currency steadily lost its value through relentless debasement, the imperial government responded by sharply raising taxes in a desperate bid to maintain revenue. The crushing burden drove countless farmers to desert their fields entirely, while long-established trade routes fractured and largely collapsed. In a frantic attempt to regain control, authorities imposed increasingly authoritarian measures, including rigid price ceilings and compulsory labor requisitions, none of which succeeded in reversing the downward spiral. The most infamous of these interventions came under Emperor Diocletian in 301 AD, when he promulgated the Edict on Maximum Prices. This sweeping decree attempted to freeze the costs of more than 1,000 essential goods, services and wages, enforcing compliance through the threat of capital punishment. Far from stabilizing the economy, the edict proved catastrophic. It triggered widespread shortages, rampant black market activity, and further economic paralysis, ultimately exacerbating the very chaos it was meant to contain. Price controls and the emergence of the solidus. Relentless inflation and thriving black market dealings completely undermined the Roman denarius, rendering it virtually worthless and shattering the framework of legitimate commerce. Government efforts to salvage the currency through rigid edicts and mandates proved futile. Citizens quickly understood that no amount of legislation could revive a fundamentally flawed money supply. In the end, the denarius was quietly phased out and discarded. In approximately 312 AD, Emperor Constantine introduced a new gold-based currency, the solidus. This high-purity gold coin delivered a much-needed measure of monetary reliability and helped stabilize economic life in the Eastern Roman, later Byzantine Empire for many generations. By then, however, the Western Roman Empire had already suffered irreversible damage and was sliding toward terminal decline. The relentless debasement of the denarius had hollowed out the very foundation of Rome's economy. It starved the military of adequate funding, severed vital trade corridors, and left the state chronically unable to respond to mounting pressures. Rather than a sudden catastrophe, Rome's collapse unfolded as a slow, grinding process of disintegration, one in which the destruction of sound money played a central and decisive role. This chapter of history serves as a stark reminder. When a society systematically degrades its own currency, it is often one of the clearest harbingers of imperial downfall. Issuing coins stripped of genuine value may briefly fool the population, but the illusion never lasts. Contemporary economies and the trajectory of the US dollar. This portion highlights striking similarities between the ancient Roman monetary decline and today's financial dynamics, zeroing in on the pivotal moment in 1971 when President Nixon severed the US dollar's convertibility to gold. That decision turned the dollar into a pure fiat currency, one whose value now rests solely on collective faith in the issuing government rather than any backing by physical reserves such as gold. In the years that followed, public and private debt exploded. The quantity of money in circulation grew enormously, and chronic inflation quietly chipped away at the currency's real buying power. What $1 could purchase in 1971 now requires more than 6 times that amount to acquire the same goods and services.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more myths.